here is Nancy Mace reacting to the killing of Charlie Kirk. Horrible and violent killing. It was very, very hard to watch. And I think we can all agree just that, political speech like this should never be met with violence. And the fact that we have weapons of war in this country like this that allow people to take this kind of action is absolutely unacceptable. And our society is deeply broken. But, that's how I think a normal person is reacting to this, in the same way that we also reacted to the assassination of the Minnesota lawmakers a few months ago. Another political assassination in this extremely kind of scary environment. But Republicans didn't really react the same way. Mike Lee, senator from Utah, tweeted out a joke about it at the time. Not seeing any Democratic senators doing this about Charlie Kirk. And here's Nancy Mace being asked, leaving the Capitol steps, about this very hypocrisy.
I'm going to say this. Democrats own what happened today. I am devastated. My kids have called panicking. All the kids of every conservative in the country called panicking. Just because you speak your mind on an issue doesn't mean you get shot.
Then by that logic, do Republicans own the shooting of the two Democratic lawmakers in Minnesota? Isn't this on both sides?
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm asking
We
a
don't
serious
know what
question.
condition Charlie Kirk is in right now. Some raging leftist lunatic put a bullet through his neck, and you want to talk about Republicans right now? No.
No, I'm asking
not
you.
at all.
You said the Democrats have
this is on. Democrats own this.
But isn't there a problem
this.
with political violence across the spectrum?
Yeah, we're talking about Charlie Kirk right now. That's the subject of this that we're talking about right now. Democrats own this 100%.
I mean, it's just, I'm not trying to clutch my pearls here, but you're a fucking congresswoman. We don't know. He hadn't even died at that point. She's already blaming a Democrat. We don't know who the suspect is. Like, get it together. But they're all. This is their messaging. This is their discipline.
They're responsible for this world we live in.
Yeah.
Every single time a classroom full of fucking kids gets lit up the same way Charlie Kirk did, where blood pools out of them the exact same fucking way. These people say thoughts and prayers, but guess what? And including Charlie Kirk says, you know what? This is just a price we have to pay. And the only thing that's different now is they see themselves in Charlie Kirk, where they don't see themselves in the kids in the church in Minnesota that got shot up. Unless they only see themselves in those kids or their parents if it was a trans person that shot them. If it was just some right winger, then you know what? Move on. This is just a price we have to pay for freedom to be able to buy whatever guns we want.
Well, even when they do, even when they do see themselves in someone, because it's the few times it's been a trans shooter, they don't actually want to deal with the real issues to save those future kids' lives. No, they want to just use it as propaganda to further their agenda against trans people, or with that what we saw with that latest thing they were spreading about the that attack on that Ukrainian refugee woman that left her killed. They wanted to turn it into a race war issue. They want to go after black people. It's a race war. No, they don't want to deal with the two underlying factors in every single one of these cases, and it's access to guns in most of these cases, and in all of these cases, there's some version of mental health care that needs to be addressed.
Yep.
Well, I mean, I think that's a great point. And I would also just highlight, Nancy Mace and the Republicans are bigots. So they just don't think, as Matt Lex said, they don't think that when things like this happen to them, it's good. And they think when it happens to marginalized groups or Democrats or anyone that is their political enemy, that it's good, which is why people can't congratulate them when they do things like this, when they agree that political violence is bad when it happens to them. And some people want to congratulate them when they admit this because they feel like it's a general admission, but it's not. It's just a very heavily curated admission that, it's good when it happens to you and it's not good when it happens to us. And then to your final point, Matt Bender, I agree. Our society, the U.S. society, is very violent. And I don't just mean the acts of interpersonal violence that occur every day, including the school shooting that happened at the exact same time as Charlie Kirk was shot. But our culture is a violent culture at the very highest levels and internationally in our treatment of marginalized groups at home. And that is just a level of violence that has a cost, a practical cost in the form of blowback, direct blowback in the form of events like 9/11, but also just like it gets diffused. That like belief that violence is okay politically gets diffused into the way people view each other in our society. And it leads to us having a very anti-social society where people are very paranoid. They cling to their guns. They hate each other. And now we're at the late stage of capitalism where our society exists to serve fewer and fewer people. Fewer and fewer people have a lot to lose. They feel more and more marginalized. They feel more and more socially alienated, not just because of the rhetoric of Republicans, but because of the general two-party systems operating in service of the uber wealthy. And so, the conditions for this sort of thing, and by this sort of thing, I mean the violent attack on Charlie Kirk, or the mass shootings, or just like interpersonal acts of violence, like hate crimes that are on the rise. That's really the core issue here. People will focus on guns, and guns and mental health, and also right-wing ideology overlap with this issue. But at its core, America sells its people a myth about the ways in which it can act violently in service of imperial and service of capital, and that there won't be any consequences, that everyone will just be fine. And as long as every so often a politician says political violence is bad, all of the incentives that are made into our system, that doesn't count, because, well, like, people can't be influenced by their environment.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's so much you said there that I think hits on the major points in this. Obviously, guns, we've covered that. That is what makes America unique in this instance. But it also is unique that we don't guarantee healthcare for people as a highly developed nation, where if we had healthcare as a right and something like Medicare for all, we could have mental health care services, so people who are this disturbed could have some level of intervention. Instead, we respond with more violence and more incarceration in that form of violence. And when you talk about our imperialism coming home, you know, why are our police units, why do they look like they just came out of Iraq? That's in part because the military-industrial complex profited so much from the war on terror that there was this all of this extra equipment, and they didn't need it, and they sent it, and they gave it to local police departments, and that is why you have like basically these armored vehicles in the middle of, I don't know, Indiana, being driven around by cops, and this high-tech weaponry essentially that they use, which has also increased the violence in our society. This is violence coming home in the same way, of course, that Israel's oppression of Palestinians ended up coming back in an attack on October 7th, and that was inevitable. The violence that America as an imperial power brings on the rest of the world, we do not exist in a vacuum. It comes home and it affects us. And the idea that Democrats own this, back to her saying this, like, you think Chuck Schumer owns this with his rhetoric? Like, we're talking about the Democratic Party here. Gavin Newsom, who's openly auditioning to be president, just had Charlie Kirk on his podcast for the friendliest interview ever. The Democrats are not responsible for this rhetoric, and it's not the rhetoric. The rhetoric is the symptom of a violent society that the Republicans have created.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the violence even. Just one real quick. It's also just the erosion of people's belief that there might be legitimate ways to redress grievances with people in positions of power. And people, like, we live in a society that has cultivated a lack of accountability for the political class, for the billionaire class. And our media, our legacy media, oftentimes exists to shield people from that reality because they benefit from it too. And I think that has been like laid bare to a lot of people as, you know, warrants for war crimes have gone unpunished. The Supreme Court has declared the President of the United States immune to all crimes. All this Epstein stuff is coming out. The situation in the context that everyone lives within is very heavily incentivizing something that the politicians and the media claim that they don't like, but create the circumstances for every day in the way in which they operate with their power. Like, it's hard to feel like bad, not necessarily hard to feel bad for Charlie Kirk, but whatever. But it's hard to feel like any kind of sympathy for the politicians in the media figures and legacy media who are calling for some kind of like peace or lack of violence, because all they're saying is like, yeah, we like all of the causes of this. We love all of the causes of this. And we love, some of them are saying we love when it happens to our enemies, but we don't want to feel implicated by this at all. We don't want to feel implicated by the violence that our politics creates. We don't want to feel implicated by the violence that our politics says is good for other people. And that's just not a very sympathetic point of view, but it is one that definitely implicates the more marginalized people, where if this violence does break out, if large-scale violence, political violence does break out, certainly more marginalized people will suffer as a result of that. But that's something that we don't necessarily have a total ability to combat with our rhetoric, because it's being incentivized at every level of people's material and social reality by the things that our politicians are doing, by the things that their aligned media apparatuses are doing.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about the discussion of, oh yeah, our support for what's going on in Palestine will never come back for us. That's violence will never cross that barrier in a way it impacts us. Charlie Kirk's last words, and people don't like this being pointed out, but I'm sorry, this is what happened. He was asked a question about shootings in America, and then it said, what are you talking about? Are you including how many shootings are in America? And he said, you talking about gang violence or not gang violence? And then he was shot in Utah by a not gang member. We have a problem with guns in this country, and this idea, and I would just say this, it's still heartbreaking. Like, gang violence should break your heart too.
Yeah.
It's a symptom of a failing society and underinvestment in community. It is a racist canard to say, well, I don't count the gang violence in Chicago or whatever, because what that type of thinking that's behind that idea. But even cancel out for that. This is an American thing. You do not see all of these a political assassination and school shooting on the same days in other countries. You just don't see it, and it's because of guns.
Right. And if you want to blame the Democrats, blame them for their complicity in the violent project spearheaded by the Republicans.
Yeah. And, also just one final point. If people want to tune out for a little bit and read a book on this, Brandon mentioned the sort of mythology we're given as Americans. And there's a book, we've had Richard Slotkin on for a more recent book. This book came out in the 70s, but it's Gunfighter Nation, The Myth of the Frontier in 20th Century America. And, this is a long-term American problem. I mean, going postal was a sort of a thing that was a culturally relevant phenomenon in the 80s and 70s, in part because of folks returning from Vietnam and stuff. America is a violent place. And, I mean, not to take up too much time, but that Adam Curtis documentary came out called Hypernormalization like years ago. And I've always thought that was like, I've always not really understood that metaphor, because I partially think that we're basically exiting a period where we were able to be delusional about this, and really it's just the actual loudness of reality coming through finally. So is it being normalized? Well, it's being normalized pretty quick, but it's also been normal, right? But
Right.
Yeah.
But we have just so many degrees of separation. I mean, for all I think it's especially
how many
more
journalists in Palestine have been killed that we've been following? Like, yeah.
I mean, I try not to be judgmental of certain people, but I saw lots of people posting about like all your friends from high school you haven't thought about in a long time, or posting about Charlie Kirk on your Instagram story. I had that dynamic too, and you have in your mind, like, have you not seen the babies that I've seen, headless toddlers, like. I mean, but there's an empathy gap because they see themselves in him. But like, it's just when we're talking about how Israel's like a zone of interest and just miles away, Palestinians are they're committing a Holocaust. Like, yeah, we have oceans between us and the people that we murder systematically, but it's kind of the same dynamic.
Well, I mean, I think also people are going to get over the Charlie Kirk thing as well. I mean, that's also part of our violent society. There is that dynamic you described where like and this is part of the legacy media's complicity in creating this violent society where human life is devalued. Like we hide those things in various forms. Back during the war on terror, we would bring the bodies back under secrecy, like so people wouldn't see all the people who were being killed on the American side because we knew that would impact people. So we hide these things and we selectively platform certain people with certain stories to have people believe that they're being informed or, performing some type of generalized empathy when it's just selective. But I think that, that works on maybe older generations like Gen X and above who have been conditioned to respond to that kind of thing because they've been conditioned to get their media from specific sources and only legitimize specific sources. But I think for younger people and even some of those older people, because of how violent America is, they'll be done with this in a week. They won't even remember it. Remember when people were saying the world was going to change after Trump got shot?
Well,
people forgot and stopped caring, and it happened almost again.
Yeah, they dropped it because it was a white kid. I mean, they'll give some
even that aside, though, it was just forgotten about. Like we just move on from things as a society as a whole, just way too fast. Like even like non-violent deaths. I remember when and maybe it's a function of being a kid and viewing these things differently as you get older. But I remember being younger, and when someone of some notoriety died, it was a big deal for a long time. Now someone of notoriety dies, and it's just a blip online until the next person of notoriety dies a few hours later. It just nothing hits the same way it used to people nowadays.
Yeah, I mean,
they will definitely try to weaponize it. Sorry, just try to weaponize it politically. But how it will stick is, I think, I'm lagging a little bit. But
no,
how
it's okay. I feel badly whenever I accidentally do it. Go ahead.
Yeah, whether or not it sticks will really depend on how people are feeling, right? I mean, this last month, a bunch of white Christian girls died at a flood in a summer camp in Texas, and people don't talk about that really anymore. And of course, because that conversation can be about the expansion of the public sector, it can be about climate change. It doesn't need to be. People just don't care anymore. And I think 9/11 starts to be where human life in America becomes increasingly devalued. But you can only devalue so many immigrants, round them up, put them in the cages, have them living in concentration camp conditions before people in your own country just don't respect life at all, even their own or each other. And we're seeing that all over the place. It's like I said, it's just a myth that is foisted upon us by the power brokers, like our government aligned media, that make us feel like, oh yeah, that stuff just won't impact how Americans feel about each other. And that some of that is aspirational because they don't want to believe that they might be endangered by their own politics. And some of that is just the petty bigotry of low expectations when it comes to the working class. Like they can just be kept in the dark and fed garbage, and they'll just they won't react reasonably to their environment. They'll just eat it or whatever, or they'll starve if it's America and they'll die.
Hundreds of people in Texas died from the power outages a few years ago, because they blamed it on windmills when it actually turned out it was a natural gas supply that had frozen. And then, like you said, the dozens and dozens of little girls swept away by floods because the county didn't decide to pay for sirens that would warn for such a thing. And then the Texas Republicans called a special session to gerrymander the state for Trump.
Right.
That was.
But we see the response when it comes to where it happens, and depending on if it's a blue state or a red state, or it works into whatever narrative the right is trying to put forth, right? Like Charlie Kirk was killed in Utah, right? I mean, can you imagine the reaction from Trump sending in the National Guard if this happened in a blue state? Of course.
All the gang violence.
But no, it happened in Utah, and no one's blaming the lackadaisical security on this the state college campus in Utah, or how the Utah government failed to make sure that someone like this individual couldn't get a firearm. No one is talking about any of that. No one talked about how what Matt just brought up about Texas's failings with people who died due to natural disasters. That's never brought up. But if a single thing happens in a blue state, all of a sudden it's a failure of that entire state's government and send in the feds.
They were holding funding. They were saying, I don't know, California, should we help you with wildfires? Mm-hmm. We're dealing with demons.
It's also, we have no accountability anymore. I think Brandon, maybe you made this point just about the lack of accountability for the war criminals in Iraq and where things started there, and even the bankers who crashed the economy in 2008. But you even see it just like eroded over the past like 6 or so years. I mean, Al Franken's resignation, compare that to like Al Franken's resignation to what is just happening on a daily basis in the Trump administration. Like, I mean, or Republicans more broadly, but even Democrats, like we have basically let go of the wheel when it comes to accountability for powerful people. And that has downstream effects. Like we used to talk about what leadership meant, and Trump's leadership means something. And it means that it's basically corroded the moral fabric of our entire society. And that has been compounded by all of the factors that we describe, and that we're in a very, very dark period of people not having agency over their lives due to income and wealth inequality and the violence that creates, because that's violence too. Let's read some IMs. We have so many people who wanted to IM in today, so I want to get through some of these. Criminal anarchy, the anti-intellectualism delays class consciousness. Our isolation removes, I think you meant to say, our humanity. There is no civic duty. We have a learned helplessness. Well said. John Brown's Body, Regeneration Through Violence by Slotkin is a great book and worth reading. The whole trilogy is worth reading.
Yeah, Regeneration Violence is the one that deals with the 19th century before Gunfighter Nation.
Noah from Tampa, as far as America being uniquely violent culturally, there was research, I want to say, out of Stanford that found that reported hallucinations of schizophrenics in America were significantly more paranoid and violent compared to the hallucinations suffered in other countries. Let me see if I can find that research. Thank you, Noah. I had actually written this down and forgotten to say it.
Where does Israel score?
Right. Well, no, it wouldn't be that high, actually, because they have healthcare and things that we also.
I mean, I think the settler colonial context might have.
Fair enough. I mean, that's a different kind of psychosis. But like in terms of schizophrenia, like mental illness does not exist in a vacuum. You know, people talk about mental illness as just like a diagnosis or not. You're on or you're off. But there are certain factors that exacerbate mental illness, like homelessness, for example.
Exactly.
Right? Like like economic precarity and anxiety. Constant anxiety creates health problems. You think it doesn't exacerbate mental illness? And when you're constantly anxious if you don't know when you're going to get kicked out of your apartment or whatever. Like this is, I sound like I'm talking about Eastern medicine, but it's really not that like far-fetched. Every part of your body affects the other part.
I mean, it's the bipartisan consensus. The Republicans and the Democrats all say mental health after stuff like this happens, and then what do? Absolute jack shit. Maybe there's an app that you can promote that will solve this.
AI therapist. You have an AI therapist who can like trick you into thinking you're your own god. But no, it's because our understanding, although it's getting better, of mental health is still rooted in treating it like a personal, individual, and moral failure. And that's the framework that people want to understand. School shootings, they want to understand this shooting within because it simplifies it. Is it good or bad? You know, or even some sort of adjacent conversation. Did he deserve it or did he not deserve it? Okay, whatever. It's bad. It's bad to get shot in front of a group full of children, for sure. You don't want that to happen. That's really bad. But as political analysis, we need to engage with like why this stuff happens, not whether it's good or bad, not whether like he deserved it or not. That's for the priests. That's for the moralists out there. In terms of like understanding like what culturally contributes to these things, that's important here. And so people want you to focus on like, oh, good, bad, disavow, not disavow, deserve. Like, but that's just to get you to turn your brain off and stop thinking about like, what does American culture do to incentivize things like this? What does American culture do to make things like this reasonable and rational to larger and larger groups of people? And are we working to correct that? Or are we making it worse? And the answer is obviously the latter. And that's why people want to focus on like, well, is this guy evil? Like, it's going to happen more and more. And because it's, acephalous and it's the result of just like, chaotic, chaotic things happening with our society, there's no way it's going to be targeted in any real way. And this is just an example of America as a failing state.
Yep. Crusty Gnome, shooter in Canada references Tim Pool and Shapiro in a shooting. Well, that's not us. We have nothing to do with that. Charlie Kirk gets shot with no indication of who did it. This is on Democrats forever. Yeah. Center Spiral, she did not celebrate his death. She warned that this will be used to harm people. I am not sure who you are referring to, Center Spiral. You got to put all... We're getting so many IMs that, like, the multi-parters are going to be very difficult for me to respond to.
Keep it brief.
Dylan from Australia, Wall Street Journal story helps manufacture consent for future civil rights crackdowns. I mean, I think that was the intent. Number 13, talk about how HBCUs are in fucking lockdown, please. I didn't see that, but that's horrifying. Leftist cuck, I'm earnestly scared. Am I overreacting by getting papers and whatnot in order for potentially fleeing? No.
Look, I mean, if you want to move to another country and you have the wherewithal to do it, but I mean, I don't think that's the sort of topic for a political show because it's not something we can advise for other people. So you deal with that on your own.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're trans, like I would probably get out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
Or Canada or something. But also, we have to win the fight here.
Yep. I'm going down with the ship. Ben Shapiro says, did anyone else go on mass unfollowing spree after seeing the worst person they knew in high school post a God Bless Charlie to their story? Unfortunately, the New York Giants' new quarterback, Jackson with an X, Darked, was posting a lot about Charlie Kirk, and I was completely not surprised at all.
The Yankees put a memorial up right before the game, like a whole display.
I know.
Insanity. I'm sorry. If I don't care. That's part of that. But if this person isn't a sports figure, isn't somehow connected with the specific team,
isn't a politician, right, like of national significance?
Yeah, but they didn't do that for the Yankees. Of course, they didn't do that for those Minnesota lawmakers that were shot and killed in their home. No, of course not.
Was Charlie a Yankees fan?
No, he wasn't. I looked it up even. He's never...
Okay, because I want the Giants to do a moment of silence for me.
It's because... No, I just wanted to say, like, the empathy button in our society is controlled by, like, the worst fringes. Like, it's only okay to perform empathy for groups under especially specific circumstances, unless, if conservatives don't think so. So once conservatives agree that, like, the person who was killed was, like, thumbs up, like, then it's okay that everyone can perform empathy for them. In other cases, like, you have to be very cautious because they might start an outrage cycle if you support a trans person who was killed, or if you support, like, a black woman who was killed. Like, a lot of institutions overperform empathy the moment conservative Republicans go like, oh yeah, this was a good person. We can all agree that we should perform empathy for this person, which just creates that effect where people just have very selective empathy for very specific types of people, oftentimes rich, oftentimes white, oftentimes at least a little bit conservative.
Theo Bong, the longer they go without catching the shooter, the longer more people will believe it was a leftist, regardless who did it. Personally, I'm willing to bet it was well, I'm not going to read this because
who knows? I don't want to do any of that. Like, it was a this or a that, or it was like, it's pointless.
It literally could be anybody. It could be anybody. Yeah. But the one thing we know for sure is that it was done with a gun. I mean, that's the underlying factor in all these cases.
This is the guy who the Yankees decided to memorialize last night.
They're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously.
Yeah.
Fuck that guy. Like, he shouldn't have been killed. Assassination is bad. It shouldn't be part of anyone's politics, and it's going to lead to worse things. The people eulogizing him and even saying, like, he was doing it the right way as opposed to, like, Nick Fuentes. No, they're different flavors of Klansmen. I'm sorry. That's the lives they chose to live. And Charlie Kirk, in his own voice, said that gun deaths were just a price we have to pay for the Second Amendment. I don't want to fucking pay that price. Charlie did.
Yeah, I don't want to pay that price either. Thank you. And I don't want anyone else to pay that price either.
Aja writes in, did you guys forget about 9/11? We did not. I don't want to participate in 9/11 was horrible, but what it has done is it has manufactured consent, and the way it's been deployed
We killed hundreds of thousands.
To kill hundreds of thousands of people in the Middle East. So I am not going to engage anymore in this propaganda stuff.
And the unity that we experienced, or certain people experienced after it, was a sick fascist unity that killed, like Emma said, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. And we're still dealing with the ramifications of it to this day. I mean, whether it was like ISIS, whether it's like the current Middle East right now.
Yes. And I actually feel a responsibility as somebody that like grew up and we thought everybody has that story, but like my dad, we thought we couldn't get in contact with him for a while. He was supposed to be in the World Trade Center, but actually was stuck in the tunnel in a bus and got turned around. He was taking the bus into the city. Regardless, like everybody I knew growing up had the story. We had a neighbor who died in 9/11, of course. Like, but I feel an extra responsibility in that way to not use it as propaganda because of what it has meant for the rest of the world. So I actually made a conscious choice not to do that.
I mean, it's the same thing we see with all these things, including the most recent event with Charlie Kirk's death. I mean, it's used for political reasons. It's used in disgusting ways to not address real issues. And in the cases like 9/11, the innocent individuals killed in that, they're constantly trotted out and used for political purposes. And I feel horrible for the families who have to deal with this every year in perpetuity. It's gonna be like this forever for them. That's one of the most horrific things I could think of after obviously losing the individual in your family or to begin with. The second most horrific thing is the fact that you have to be a part of this every single year. You're not able to just mourn like everybody else when somebody dies in a normal, natural way. You have to be a part of this national spectacle, and it's got to kill you every single time you got to take part in it.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.